Hello and welcome to the Connectology podcast. Here, Road Knight Taylor's influential team of elite connection specialists and their expert guests help you to better understand distribution and transmission network connections and how to acquire them faster, for less cost and at lower risk. I'm Hugh Taylor, CEO at Road Knight Taylor, and for those of you who don't know us yet, we're the independent specialist grid consultancy, and our Connectologists help a roll call of the UK's leading developers and investors in commercial, industrial and energy developments to significantly outperform their peers, as well as helping intensive energy users to get the connections they need to decarbonise their operations, and public sector clients striving to enable economic and housing growth. Today we're talking about National Grid's TEC Amnesty, which at a very high level, which to be honest is all I can muster, is a time-limited opportunity for project developers to cancel connection offers they've accepted without incurring cancellation charges. Thankfully, I'm joined today by Catherine Cleary, who knows a lot more about these things. Catherine is one of Road Knight Taylor's Connectologists, and she has an absolutely stunning CV, having already achieved her Master's in Electrical Engineering from Oxford and did her research project at Princeton, and advised Ofgem for 4 years on contested connection offers and also on reinforcement works, and has advised the likes of HS2's board on their connection strategy, the Department for Transport on the electrification of motorway service areas, and then until last year, Catherine headed up the grid team at GridServe, the EV charging hub developer. So Catherine carries out a lot of Road Knight Taylor's transmission connections work, and she's very well placed to help development and investment directors to identify opportunities that might be obvious or otherwise that the TEC Amnesty might provide for them. So first of all, hello, Catherine, and thank you very much for coming on here, even though you've got a shocking cold. So thank you.
No worries, Steve.
And the very first question, and I had a stab there at explaining what the TEC Amnesty is, but first of all, what actually is it?
Yes, I think you got it in a nutshell. It's an opportunity for customers who've accepted offers with National Grid, so contracted schemes, to relinquish TEC. So that could be a kind of a complete project cancellation, or it could be just downsizing a scheme. It's actually it's not a kind of formal process. A TEC Amnesty is a relatively unusual event, so we've only had a couple in the kind of last 20 years of National Grid transmission history, and it's something which National Grid are kind of calling for interest in now. So it's not even something that you need to absolutely commit to, but if this is something which could be of interest to a project of yours, then the window is open at the moment.
I must say I hadn't realised that it's been done before. So as far as some people are concerned, although it was a long time ago, that it would be a sort of a relatively well-trodden path, or not. But you say you were talking about sort of cancelling schemes. Did you suggest that actually it's not just if you're cancelling a scheme in its entirety?
Yeah, and this is really important because actually probably the number of parties, especially recently contracted parties that want to cancel schemes in their entirety, may be quite limited. But we probably suspect there might be a few parties out there who have accepted offers, perhaps for a kind of nominal capacity. So when you went in and applied, you perhaps thought your battery scheme or your solar scheme was going to be 300 megawatts. You've accepted that, and then subsequently you might have done some more kind of conceptual design work, or perhaps planning work, which has refined that kind of project size. And so this is a really good opportunity actually for people who are a little bit further down the line to tweak that capacity number, because as most people will be aware, once you have signed on the dotted line of a connection offer, any decrease in your connection TEC can be liable for cancellation charges. So this is potentially an opportunity to just hand back maybe only 10, 20, 40 megawatts of TEC, but without attracting any of those cancellation charges.
Great. And actually it is worth pointing out just now that we are running a webinar on cancellation charges on securities and liabilities and stuff that, frankly, I don't understand. But if that is interest to anybody who's listening to this, then if you just jump on the Road Knight Taylor website, roadknighttaylor.co.uk, there'll be a link in the description. And if you go to the Connectology page and register there, then you'll get the Connectology newsletter. So you'll see when that's coming up. And that the webinar that we're going to be doing is going to be very much taking you sort of beyond what you would get. So National Grid has some fantastic slides and webinars on securities and liabilities, and we're actually going to dig a bit deeper and show you some really cool stuff that you might want to think about. So thank you very much, Catherine. And so what is the difference between a tech amnesty? I thought it was the tech amnesty. Now I know it's just a tech amnesty, between that process and a normal mod app.
Yeah, so I guess most parties would expect that at some point between accepting your original offer and actually building out the scheme, you'll need to change something around perhaps the technology assumptions or the connection dates or the tech. And the normal path for that in kind of business as usual is to do a modification application, so a mod app. A mod app has a fee associated with it. So that's one thing to bear in mind. This tech amnesty process, there are no fees. So there are no fees associated with National Grid assessing the tech reduction, and there are no fees in terms of cancellation charges. So if we carried on with that 300 megawatt solar example, if you were looking to kind of perhaps drop that down to 240 megawatts, something which might be quite a nice size to fit on a single transformer, for example, then you would be saving both your mod app fee, which might have been somewhere in the region of about £25,000, but you would also be saving the cancellation charge associated with the reduction of that tech going from 300 back down to 240. And that could be several £100,000. So there is a real incentive for people to think about this now, as opposed to perhaps a couple of years before connection when you're ordering your plant.
Excellent. Thanks, Catherine. Let's pick that back up straight after this.
If you're liking this podcast so far, you may want to pop over to the Connectology page on Road Knight Taylor's website and sign up to the Connectology newsletter for much more know-how, insight and thought leadership in electricity network connections. The link to this is in the description. Don't miss out on any of the articles, explainers, videos, webinars and podcasts that Road Knight Taylor's Connectologists share to give you an edge and help you overcome your grid frustrations. In this dash for transmission that we've seen, the huge volume of connection applications going into National Grid, so ESO, has been extraordinary, and we've ended up doing, so not me obviously, but you and the other connectologists have ended up doing a lot of connection offer reviews, and it's apparent that the level of understanding amongst the developer community, as you can imagine, it's relatively nascent. So a lot of applications were going in for some fairly kind of unsophisticated scales in terms of the capacity that is being applied for. So do you think that there is actually a sort of across the developer community that there will be relatively large volumes of projects where some tweak to the capacity might be necessary?
Yeah, I think based on what we've seen so far, and I think the kind of the round numbers tell it all from the tech register. I think realistically we are expecting the vast majority of schemes perhaps offered in the last year or so in the battery and solar space to need to have a little bit of refinement perhaps once the actual engineering concept design is done, but also I think as a result of the planning process, so once people look at kind of land suitability as well. So I think it's probably unavoidable that there's going to be a little bit of change as those projects progress and evolve and develop. And obviously in the normal run of the mill, many people wouldn't be worried about perhaps holding on to 10 or 20 megawatts of extra tech and then just sort of modifying, as I say, a couple of years prior to completion. I think we're just highlighting now that this could be quite a good opportunity. If you've already done some of that work and you need to tweak those capacities, then the Tech Amnesty offers a good chance to do that effectively for free. Okay,
great. And that brings me kind of very neatly round to my last question, whilst we've still got you before your cold sort of drags you away. And that's, so there's a couple of things. First of all, is it too late to get involved? But secondly, getting that design work done. So we might have people listening who are thinking, well, I mean, if it's potentially the majority or a decent chunk of those accepted connection offers are going to want to, tweak the tech that they've secured in, some way, in, sort of up or down, is it that actually they might have time to do some of that work between now and the end of the tech amnesty, or actually, is it so close that there's not a lot can be done?
Yeah, so the tech amnesty, so that the first stage of it is the kind of expressing intention, so call for expressions of interest, and that closes on the 30th of November. So you've got about another 5 weeks to do that. As I say, that doesn't necessarily need to be an absolutely finalised commitment from the developer to hand back the tech, and it also doesn't necessarily need to be an absolutely finalised megawatt number that you're handing back, but it does need to be a clear indication of what you're handing back and why. So i.e. I am cancelling this entire project, or I'm refining my tech, and I think I might want to hand back in the region of 60 to 100 megawatts or something of that region. So in the next 5 weeks, that's probably quite a short period of time to do any kind of meaningful engineering conceptual design work. Some of this is going to involve, from an engineering perspective, that some of the reasons that you might want to reduce tech on some of these schemes is thinking about the deliverability in terms of substation size. Some of these schemes, especially the larger kind of 500, 600, 800, even a gigawatt schemes, are looking at installing lots and lots of substation plant, which is going to be a really significant land take and have an impact on planning. So it's quite a kind of complex picture with a lot of things feeding into it. So I suspect this particular opportunity is probably mostly for developers who've already had a think about that and have got some kind of firmer ideas about the most deliverable version of their project going forwards.
And after that, thank you. And after that, that 5 weeks, how long is there then that they actually have to submit something more concrete to National Grid?
Yeah, so Grid will be will effectively get in touch with developers who express interest in the tech amnesty and will outline the process, but it won't be dissimilar to a normal mod app. So expect to be asked to resubmit your kind of technical DRC documents, for example, which is the kind of like technical data which goes alongside your application, and then expect to have a variation agreement, so an agreement to vary from National Grid, probably produced in sort of 3 to 4 months following that 30th of November window.
Okay. All right. So I mean, it is a relatively short amount of time if some of those things that you're talking about might actually drive that the potential change in the capacity of a project. And as you said, that there are some sort of very round numbers, and I know that we've been involved with some projects where some very, very round numbers have been selected by developers. I think that typically, if you look at the tech register, there's lots of kind of, they begin with a 3 and they begin with a 5. When you're looking at the tech register, can you see relatively obvious opportunities where developers might be able to come down to something that just fits within design limits for specific National Grid assets that might give people like an easier opportunity and an early opportunity to make adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one very specific thing, which and here I think we should be clear, we're talking about onshore projects. So the kind of recent solar and battery applications which have gone in, it's not unusual, I think we should say, for projects of all types to have a round number in the tech register. So and many times that will be an estimate as to what a seabed lease area is capable of for offshore wind, or actually just based on some kind of SQSS limits, for large new like nuclear stations. So those existing technologies are a bit different. It's these new players for solar and batteries, specifically, I think, which we're talking about here in terms of optimizing those connection sizes. Yeah. And they're not necessarily optimizing them for National Grid assets. They're optimizing them for their own customer assets. So we've talked a lot to developers who are really keen on stepping directly from 400 down to 33 kV. Now, the transformer sizing for that's quite a key role in determining what a kind of viable project size is. The difference between having to buy one 400 kV transformer and having multiple 400 kV transformers with a 400 kV switchyard on your site. That's quite a kind of step change in like substation footprint, capital costs of the project. So I suspect perhaps I'm kind of focusing particularly around the kind of 250 up to 400 megawatt scale, where I think potentially projects might end up sitting in a slightly difficult design window in terms of that transformer arrangement, if they are looking to step directly from 400 down to 33 kV.
Good. Well, that was fantastic for me, Catherine. Thank you very much. Did you have anything else to add before I send you back to your LEMSIP?
No, I think that's covered us off, hopefully, Hugh.
Brilliant. Well, Catherine, thank you so much. Look forward to your next podcast, which might be when you're a bit better. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Connectology podcast. If you found it helpful, please share it with any of your colleagues or connections you think may be interested. And please do subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. You can find out more about our services at roadknighttaylor.co.uk, link in the description, where you can also sign up to our free Connectology newsletter for more news and thought leadership in network connections. If, during this podcast, you found yourself wondering what it would be like to have a Road Knight Taylor connectologist in your life, please do email laura@roadknighttaylor.co.uk to find out how their game-changing skills and insight can change the game for you too.